I'll talk about it briefly. I don't know if there's a whole lot.
It's not on the agenda though, right?
No, that was kind of more for our informational purposes, so, yeah.
Talking about Quincy Farm.
What?
Are you talking about Quincy Farm?
Yes.
I'll give a report on it, even though it's not on the
Yeah.
agenda, but yeah, since you have the letter on the dais too.
Are we do anything with these microphones? Or are we okay on Staff East? I don't remember.
Please don't switch it off of Staff East. It'll kill the Zoom audio.
I will not
So you can just leave it there.
Right where it's at.
She, near the tree, my understanding is when she's walking down the Colorado.
Take the minutes.
She can't get out of that agreement.
It's okay.
I think what they're going to do out
And I put it into some for.
So I'm glad you guys are.
Yeah. that- There you are.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we're live and streaming and everything, so we can give it a couple minutes to let the rest of the members get here, but the Zoom meeting is all set up. And you didn't have anything from Rob last minute, right? Okay. You don't have an email from him?
I'm gonna double check real quick again if you like. See if anything has gone on.
Yeah, I'll look for him. I'll let it pop up on here. Hello.
Hi, Tori.
Thank
Thank you.
you. So hot out there. Not that hot. Oh, we're gonna reset that.
Don't do it. I'm okay. Are you cold? Are you too hot?
I'm just right. but
I would just leave it.
No, cut it down.
It also takes a while to start to get hot, so
Yeah.
I'd rather not be freezing if I don't have to be. Yeah.
Right on my desk. It's cold.
Sure, are you ready to get started?
Yes, we're just waiting on Kate, but she said she'd be here, but she may be running a little late.
He's been,
Yes, you do have a
I
quorum.
was pretty into this, 'cause I haven't seen it yet.
Oh, gotcha, okay, perfect, all right. You ready?
Ready.
All set.
We'll call for the Recreation Commission meeting for.
Oh, I'm sorry, can you turn your microphone on and talk into it? Because that's what picks up the audio on the Zoom meeting. Thank you.
All right, well, we will call to order the Parks and Trails Recreation Commission for August 13th, 2020. It is 5:32. And we will get started. And Emily, do you do a roll call?
Pamela. Sorry.
Kate Murphy, Fred Wolf,
Here,
Rod Eber, Aaron Gradinsky,
Here.
Stephanie Dahl,
Here.
Tori Leviton,
here,
Chelsea Scott,
Here. All right, pledge of allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, so first is our audience participation period. Mr. Skolnick, I know you're signed up here, but I also know we have you on the new business, so are we okay waiting for a second to address that under the new business?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So if we can, everyone's given their packets with the consent agenda with our minutes from last time, the opportunity to review those.
second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And for the record, Commissioner Murphy is present.
thank you.
Okay, so we are going to switch around our agenda a little bit. We're going to move new business up in front of our unfinished business so that Mr. Cohen is present. So we're going to take him first so he doesn't have to sit through everything else. So, sir, if you would like to approach, introduce yourself and your address for the record.
I'm Jay Skolman. I live at 1635 East Layton Drive. I've been there since 2006. And I'm here to discuss it's like an agreement to allow me to go to the back property, access the back side of the property. I'm not sure if you've done the research, but our plat actually goes over the bridle path. We own the land to the east of the bridle path. So we actually are granting the easement that is the bridle path to the city, but it's really our land. So all we're trying to do is renew our agreement so we can access the back of our property and get our hay and the sewer and all that, the barrier, whatever they call it. And that's what we have an agreement. I think it was only about 3 years. It's expired. So we just need to renew it. And that's all. We've had some issues with access in the past, and it wasn't really, it didn't seem like we resolved it, but just recently, I guess, we've had a few issues just with, we have someone who maintains our horses, and so that I guess they had some issues with someone who didn't understand maybe our agreement, and gave them a hard time, I guess, to get in and out of the property.
So you rent your property to Mary Keith?
Well, we have an arrangement where we let her have her 2 horses if she takes care of our horse. So,
Okay,
and in the press, it's a real benefit to have someone take care of the horses for us. So that's the arrangement we made with her. I'm aware of section 16.2-730, allowing us to board horses. So I don't think there's an issue there.
So I'm trying to understand, I walk by there every single day. So your property line, is it where the white fence is, or is it on the other side of the bridle path?
No, it's on the other side. It's actually up the hill a little. It's where the transformer is.
Okay,
And there used to be some stakes up there. If you walk along there, you might see one stake for some of the property owners. But yeah, it goes up the hill,
okay.
and it's basically the transformer.
And you're requesting that, tell me again what you're.
Well, we have an agreement that we've already signed, with the city manager. We don't want to cause any trouble, but we just want to have free and, whatever, just free access to the back of our property. I mean, it is our property access. Granted, we have to go through some other easements, but we just want to have the same easements that the other homeowners are enjoying.
Because you can get a vehicle in there right now. Through the,
Yeah, we have to get the hay sometimes, it would be too hard to just lug the hay without a vehicle, so we have to get the vehicle. We actually Mary put in an 8-foot gate, we used to have maybe a 4 or 6. So now we can actually turn.
Right.
And since we do own that land up on the hill there, there's no problem doing a turning radius for us. The problem is we can't access our land from Lake. It's just, there's a creek and a bridge, so we can't get to the horses at all. So this is our only access to the horses. The city did give us a building permit for the barn, so it would be sort of ironic for them to let us build a barn to not access it, or at least get hay and other things that we need. But, we only get the hay. I don't know what her schedule is, but when my wife used to manage it, she used to we had a couple horses there before the one horse passed away. It was like once every 3 months, maybe. Basically fill up as much as you can. That's the idea. You fill up your stalls,
Mhm.
and then occasionally you don't have to do as much furring, farrowing, but you don't have to do as much shooting, but because they're not really riding them that much. But I guess you do have to. I'm not the horse person to tell, but occasionally you have to cut their hoofs. So anyway, there is a little. You got to have a guy come in and do that. I'm sure the guy that Mary ran into didn't know our arrangement, and maybe didn't even know where the lot line was. Maybe we can't expect people to work for the city to know where the lot line and know what the rights are. But we told her anyway not to do it in the easement anyway. We said that was pretty stupid on her part. We've always had ours come in. We got an acre and a half there. There's lots of room for a guy to drive in there, take care of the horses, let alone we might have an emergency, we've got those horses are basically the retired horses, so they're not young, they need sometimes some care, but right now it's mostly just hay, water, and manicures.
So you're asking for the city just to renew your.
Yeah, we just want a renewal. We've made a couple of changes to it, but I think it's.
Are the changes?
If I may, there is a memo with background in your packets, and I do have a staff presentation whenever the commission is ready for that.
One of my questions was gonna be with the changes. I felt like when I read this, the original allowed for twice a month of access, and the way I read it now is that it is
Yeah, we don't want to be limited.
no loan limitations.
I'm tired of
Is that right?
I'm not interested in limitations. I took out all the stuff that, maybe at that time we were like, just happy to get it signed, but we're not interested in limitations or, we're not going to abuse it, but we're not interested in limitations to our land. It's not gonna, we want access to our land, we're not gonna there's no reason for us to abuse it, but, I'm not interested in checking in with people to get into my property.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was just stupid.
Emily, do you wanna?
Sure, so I can go through the memo and provide some background for this. So the original agreement was signed in 2013 by City Manager Patterson. So that granted vehicular access to what we know as Trail 2047 to care for horses that are on the property. So as Mr. Skolnick has explained, the property is bisected by Little Dry Creek and accessible by a footbridge. So the original agreement stipulated that access would be twice a month during regular city business hours with 24-hour advance notice to the city. So notice was required so that staff could unlock the bollard that's located off of Huntwick Lane, which you can see on the map in front of you on the screens. So that there's room for a vehicle to actually drive down the trail. So the original agreement was limited to a year and it expired on October 29th, 2014. So until this winter, we weren't aware that the Skolnicks were still using the trail for access. In February, sorry, do you mind if I take this off? I can't talk with it. In February, the request was made by the border on the property for us to remove the bollard because it had frozen into the ground. So we did remove the bollard at that time, but we let the property owners know at that point that the trail, the agreement would need to be renewed for future vehicular access to the trail. So in May, the border requested again for us to remove the bollard. We again advised a new agreement was necessary. And in July, code enforcement responded to a complaint regarding private vehicles related to this agreement, driving up the trail, leaving the trail and parking on other private property along the trail. So park staff also observed at that point that the lock on the bollard had been, the lock chain on the bollard had been cut. On July 7th, the Skolnicks submitted this new letter of request and proposed agreement, and that's attached in your packets as well. So as you all know, especially based on our recent e-bikes discussions, we don't allow motorized vehicles on any trails besides public utility or emergency vehicles. So if vehicular access is needed for a trail, we usually, it's for utility work usually, and we grant them a temporary right-of-way permit. So it's a time-limited permit for that type of access. Revocable licenses aren't usually granted for vehicular trail access. And there aren't other similar licenses in effect that we're aware of. So at this time, staff is not recommending granting a revocable license for regular vehicular access to a bridle trail. And whatever PTRC decides will be referred to City Council for City Council to make the final decision.
I don't know if you can answer this question, but obviously there's a number of properties. I don't know if they have horses. What do other owners do who come back to that bridle trail to get, they have a creek running through their property as well? How do they handle it?
That I'm not aware of, and I don't know if there are other properties along that section that have horses in the back.
Yeah, you know it.
Do you want to see the survey, by the way, that you asked what the property line was? When you bring this to? Just, you know, because like when they said that somebody parked on the, your land, they may have been parked, but even though that was probably not the right thing to do, they probably parked on the hillish area, and that guy might not realize it's not his problem.
I've never seen any vehicles parked there that are
There's
related to,
closest to you is the easement.
right,
You can see the property corner
the
is,
creek is here, this is the bridle path easement.
Yeah.
It's talking about access.
you can see the far,
The end
the
of-
pin at the far side is beyond the easement.
And
So-
for the record, because I know that we are on the record recording this, what has been handed up to Commissioner Wolf has been the land survey plat for Mr. Skolnick's property. Is that correct, sir?
Yeah, that's the also survey for my property. Here is the plat for the whole subdivision.
Right.
And you can see the easements inside the flat. Which would, which the Alta survey would overlay. So just to tell you what the neighbors do there. The neighbor to the west. Just up, yeah, well, I'm gonna, okay, so,
So
1645.
this is the miners here.
okay, so the miners, yeah, it's like, it's sort of south or,
They don't have any horses.
Yeah, I don't know.
yeah, they have pigs, yeah. And Carl is on the other side, he's got, he just mows it.
You're the only one
with
horses.
Yeah, we, no one had horses before us there. And then, I don't think any of those other people, there's no one who has horses along that part.
And how many horses were we talking about?
Well, we only have 3,
But Mary has 2, right?
yeah.
So you have 5 on the property?
No,
No,
Or
3.
there's 3 total?
2, her 2 and ours. I don't know, how
And,
long ours will last, but they're just.
The footbridge reference that goes across the creek, is that your personal bridge? How does that-
Oh, yeah, that's on our property, yeah. Then,
So
well,
arguably, you could put a different way to get over the bridge that could transport vehicles.
So we have a creek with a horse property and it has been paved over rather than just a footbridge to access the barn. And we don't, it was all there when we moved there, and we don't abut a trail, so I'm not sure how that would have come up anyways. But I do know it was asphalted over on purpose, so they wouldn't have to worry about encroaching on other neighbors, so.
you could never drive from Layton through our backyard over that bridge. It's about a 25% drop. Yeah, it just wouldn't make sense. Plus, it's like, maybe be driving around my pool deck. It'd be pretty squirrely.
So you need to have access as well as Mary Keaton does to take care of the horses.
Yeah, I don't care about Mary. I need access, whether, she might not stay there, she may be gone next year, who knows, but right now, it's nice we have our horse there, and I need access for our horse. Yeah, like, my wife would just take over the management.
And Emily, the way it is right now, the bollard at the end of Huntwick Lane allows for vehicle access twice a month.
No, the current agreement is expired, so that bollard is typically locked. When park staff went out to check on it following code enforcement being out there, the lock chain had been cut. So I do believe that the lock was replaced since then, but right now it should be locked, like many of our other bollards are, to prevent vehicles from driving on the trails when we don't know.
What was the discussion? Well, let me back up and ask the first question. When was the barn built, sir?
I would be guessing at like 5-6 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because my question being is, obviously, there's certain utility that goes with it, and have a barn and things like that. Was there any discussion that occurred at that time about how to have access to the barn? Like how did construction
Well,
equipment
we
get
got
in
the
there? How
agreement.
did,
Construction was permitted by right of
Sorry?
The agreement was a 1-year agreement that expired and wasn't automatically set to renew.
No, I think
6 years
it's
ago.
a 3-year.
It was a
No.
1 year and it had to be, you had to request renewal each year. The reason it was 1 year and Mr. Patterson did it as 1 year is the owners were to find other ways to get to their property.
That's crap.
That,
We weren't supposed to find other ways. We only had that way.
all right, well, we'll
They
take
just want to
one,
have
we'll do,
a short leash on the deal.
okay, we'll do
I
this.
wanted to
Let's
play
do-
games on this 1-year deal. That was not the reason. He just wanted to always have us come in, renew it, and then he'd say, okay. All we want to do is have it valid while we own the house. If we move, it could expire. That's the better way to do it because we're living in the house. But we just don't want to come in every year and ask for a renewal. We're not going to do that. And this wasn't a 1-year game. There was no 1-year deal where we're going to build a barn and look for another way to get in there. I mean, how stupid is that? That was not the deal. We weren't even here then. We just agreed to the 1 year, just do automatic renewals, that's all it was.
Well, no, like
He's
that.
walking out of school, that was not the deal.
Okay, well, we're gonna take comments from everybody, so, and I can understand, but I'm gonna let you finish your comment, and then obviously if there's stuff you'd like to add, we'll really hear from you, and same thing for you, Kate. Why don't you go ahead and finish?
Just a few facts. The trail was dedicated with the subdivision prior to the current resident being there. Those trails were not dedicated by the current resident. Those trails have stipulations within the city code as to the use for those. There is no access to this trail without going over somebody else's easement in a whole different subdivision. These trails are not designed for vehicles to be on there. This situation was in place before the current resident bought the homes. And I've been here 17 years for the record. So I was here when the agreement was signed and I was part of the agreement. Mr. Patterson made that 1 year to give the residents time to find another way to access the property. So those are the facts. And that's why staff is recommending denial of this. Other people in that section have put bridges across there. There are a number of bridges that are vehicle bridges. And there are a number of accesses that are just footbridges.
Well, I'm familiar with the property as well. I walk by there virtually every day as well with my dog, and I don't know how else you would be able to get hay in there without a vehicle, so I'm perplexed by that. I don't know if there could be some sort of easement, some sort of granting of, you know, maybe there has to be some sort of limit to it as to how many times, if he says hay lasts 3 months and it's 4 times a year, but I don't know how you would get, unless you're gonna be going on with some sort of ATV type of vehicle, but that'd be a million trips with hay. I don't know how you would access that property, if I'm thinking of the right property. And I think I know Mary Keith's horses, I used to feed them, so, I don't know, I'm perplexed by how you would, that is definitely a horse property. I don't know how you would feed your horses without access to getting food to the horses, so I'm open to suggestions, I just don't want to be closed-minded here either, so.
Like, have there been any discussions regarding, you know, how to continue, obviously, to feed the livestock and things like that?
There have not. If city council directs us to create a new agreement, that would be part of that discussion. But until we get that direction from city council, we haven't gotten into any details.
Just to be clear, as was originally construed in the agreement, city has to be informed of the intent to access, and then city employees need to go and unlock and provide the access, and then relock thereafter.
That's correct.
That's a burden on city resources to a certain extent.
Yes. So for context, a lot of the other sections of trail have locked bollards at them so that we can have utility vehicles or emergency vehicles access them. But we have that safety measure of vehicles can't drive down a trail without anyone knowing, right? And create that conflict with equestrians and pedestrians and cyclists. So yes, the original agreement was set up so that the city would have 24 hours notice so that we could go out and unlock the bollard and remove it for the Skolnicks, and then return and relock the bollard once they were finished using the trail.
So right now, Mary Keat, because I've been there when she's delivered hay and there's a truck, and I mean, it's a big deal to get a year's worth of hay or whatever in there. When that happens, Mary calls you, Emily, at the city, or calls the city, and they come and unlock that bollard
As
So
the
she didn't get her
agreement
truck?
was written, yes. So we weren't aware that the Skolnicks were still accessing the trail in the interim between 2014 and this February, basically, when we got this request because the bollard had frozen. But yes, that is how it would work under the original agreement. And how it has worked when she called us in February.
And you have no idea who cut the lock?
We do not know who cut the lock.
I don't know why anybody would do that.
It wasn't cut, it looked like it was sort of like a U-bolt. Well, imagine this is the wood, if there was a thing like this and it was just hanging out. So it was ineffective.
I know that in the
I think
original
it
agreement
was damaged, but
from 2013 in section 4, it says that the parties may agree to an extension of this agreement upon mutual written consent. Since this original agreement, has there ever been in writing, whether it be a text message, an email, and anything between you and the city agreeing to extend this, like any sort of pattern?
I don't think so. Anyway, first of all, I apologize, I didn't know you've been here 17 years, but on the same token, when someone buys a property subject to an easement, even though the easement was created before they got there, they're still buying it because they want to enjoy access through an easement. So whether the easement was there before me or after, or, I don't care if I didn't record the plat, the easement was there. Taking away the easement, in my opinion, would be a takings. I would not be able to use the backside of my property. And, we don't want to go that route, but in my opinion, if I can't access the back of my property, that would be a takings to the back of my property. Especially when the easement's on my property. If the easement was outside of the property, it might be a little different argument, but the fact that the easement is on my property, even though you're right, I'm using other easements, that could be some other argument, but the easement is on my property and not being able to access my easement would take away the access to the backside of my property, which essentially would be a takings.
To clarify, nothing about this revocable license changes the easement or any access related to an easement. The revocable license gives permission for vehicular access to the trail. Nothing about the easement itself, the way it was granted, is affected.
Have we heard from, I think probably would be 1625 East Layton Drive? Because that seems to be, if you come in off of Huntwick, that's the only piece of property that you would have to technically drag on their portion of the easement before we get to yours. Is that correct, or are there other properties?
Well, the back of Carl's is like sort of his easement. He's the others, like the miners with the pigs are on one side, he's on the other side. He's 45, isn't it?
1625.
Yeah, he's 25. Yeah.
And then, Emily, do you know, where it appears probably the bollard is that an easement on number 11's property?
I think that's just in the right of way.
Is it just,
I'm not sure where the right of way is.
Yeah, I'm not sure which is right of way and which is easement at that point.
the reason I'm asking is I just didn't know if there'd been any communication with the property owner, we'll just say for now 1625 East Layton, about their feelings of limited, unlimited, whatever, but vehicle access on their easement, because it is on their property.
We haven't received anything from that homeowner.
I just have a question. Has this situation ever come up before where there's been access issues specifically on a trail where there's a need for livestock or anything like this? Any precedent?
Not to my knowledge, this is the only revocable license that we have a record of being granted this way for for a vehicle to access a trail. So like I said before, typically it's a time limited right-of-way permit for specific work or for a specific project to be happening at a homeowner's property, rather than a long-standing license for vehicles to be entering and exiting.
So this 2013 agreement was kind of the first of its kind, right? This
As
1 year,
as far as we know, yes.
Was there any other documentation from a city perspective that is contained? Because right, when we read this, it does say for the temporary and limited motorized vehicle use. But I don't know, I hear what you're saying, Mr. Scully, but look, when we had conversations, that was not the intention, that this was just year to year, we were going to renew it. Is there any other documentation other than this?
Unfortunately, the city manager set this agreement up and it did not go to PTRC or city council at that time. The city manager sort of unilaterally created this agreement. So we don't have other, documentation of discussions from a council meeting or a public meeting that we'd be able to provide.
Well, I'm not an attorney, but I'm trying to get this down to just common sense. It seems to me, as long as you own the property, you should have a right to access your property. And this shouldn't be something that comes up every single year.
Well, you think that the easement is sort of unilateral. If I give an easement, I should receive an easement. I am a taxpayer in the city and I need to access the back. I just can't get anything over that bridge and, there's a creek there.
If there was no bridle path, what would happen? Right, like, let's say the city didn't maintain or have a bridle path back there, how would you get to the back of your property?
Well, we could walk back there, like the doctors or the farriers, they could probably walk over the bridge, but the hay would be a real challenge. I mean, I got the water back there, that was a challenge, but the hay would be a real challenge.
So the big challenge is the hay, and if there's an emergency, we need to get.
Right, yeah, the hay and the emergency, yeah, because we don't know, horses do have issues, especially when they could kick each other or whatever, but yeah, it's basically the hay is the biggest challenge. It's
I don't know the first thing about taking care of horses, but is there any creative solution that has hay getting to that property other than,
I mean, I was thinking even if we couldn't do vehicles, I mean, a bale of hay, I mean, we can wagon it, we could drag it, and it would take a long time, and we could, I guess, tell people, hey, we need, 20 bales of hay, and you guys can use like sort of, vehicle has to have a motor, I guess, so we can have a bunch of wagons and just tie up the trail for a day.
That's crazy.
I mean,
Now, if the bridle path weren't as wide as it is right now, if it were like a single path, the way our bridle paths are in the village, then I get why we would have a concern, but I've seen landscape trucks on that road over the years. I've seen Mary Keith's truck with the hay, so I don't get what the concern is here.
I'm fine with an agreement with some stipulations, but yeah, we shouldn't, obviously, let's face it, you guys have to give me access. We can decide how good the access is gonna be. And that's all we have to decide on is how good is the access gonna be and do we wanna have a fight? So it's a matter of like, I gotta get hay, how practical do you wanna be? I can tell you my wife is out of town, but if she was here, I'd probably be trying to hold her down a little because she's gonna throw all the horse manure on that easement, I can tell you. And I don't know, what the next thing's gonna be, but she's not gonna be a happy camper. That's our land. We could just, I don't know, I wouldn't tell her to do that, but she might start dumping all the horse manure on that and it just, that would be an ordinance issue. So I just like to work together or we could decide, let's end this and just fight, you know? I mean, I'm a taxpayer here, but it's up to you guys, and I just gotta access that, and, you know, I can tell you that my wife's got other horses, like, when they get old, they're gonna be at the house, you know? We're, you know, we decided this, you know, we're empty nesters, that we like staying there, and this is what we wanna do, is, you know, just relax, hang out, have her old horses there, and, but, you know, it's just how, it just depends how much you wanna dig your heels in. I mean, we don't wanna have vehicles on there often either, but, you know, let's face it, 3-4 times a month, a year, I should say, is not a big deal. I mean, we can certainly control Mary, we could tell her, I don't know if she brings her vehicle more often than she, you know, I don't know what she does, but I don't have her that much, but, you know, she, you know, I don't know where she parks or, you know, how she managed her deal, but,
Well, she usually parks on the cul-de-sac and walks over.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
that's,
on Brunswick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's, I mean, that should not be a problem, parking on a cul-de-sac, it's people, you know, can park there and walk their dog, I guess, and so, yeah, so at least she's not parking inside, because then she'd be going back and forth, so it's really just for hay.
Right.
But,
Right.
we just have no other alternative, and it's an unusual situation. Well, it wouldn't be that unusual, because Carl, if he sold his house and to a horse person, and he's gonna market it to horse people, there'd be another person that couldn't, you know, he's got the creek running through his. The pig guy, he's got so much going on with his pool, he couldn't get a truck back there. He's got a bridge, I don't know about a paved bridge, I never heard of that. These bridges are pretty thin, they're not vehicle bridges. And they're not built to codes for, you know, for vehicles. And of course, they're like 30% grades, so, you know, you couldn't make it.
So, I have a question for you. So in your version of this agreement, would you be reaching out to the city, like whenever you need access to the trail, there's every 3 or 4 months?
I think Cheryl called the guy a few times, like I think she was calling him, or he'd open it. And then it was like, after we do that 3-4 times, like, don't worry about it. I don't, you know, it was her call.
Yeah, you mentioned some changes to the agreement, and I was just curious if that was one of them, if you were willing to, you know, make that call so they could be aware there would be a vehicle on the trail for city management purposes.
Yeah, for safety or city manager, sure, or she, you know, maybe an email's so easy, because then you have the documentation, but, you know, yeah, I'm okay with that, it's fine. But we can manage that.
Is there any other information that you think we should know before we kind of discuss? Obviously, there's some questions.
Should I know about the access or what you need? No, you can just look at each agreement, there's some minor changes, I just didn't want it to be management intensive, and I don't think we added anything, I think we just took out some of the controlling issues, that's all. Yeah, we didn't, I don't think we added any other than, we made it a little more specific with hay or whatever. And I think we could have added just some things that we might need, you know, we may put a fur carrier.
I do think that you would, if this is granted, Mary Keat would need to have a full understanding, and you would have to have a full understanding with Mary Keat as too. She's a little bit flighty sometimes, at least in my dealings with her.
Oh, yeah, we told her, you know, we told her she was wrong to get in an argument with the guy that was approaching her or whatever. So, you know, I mean, I told her, like, you can't do that, otherwise you're gonna lose your, you know, I don't want someone helping us out that's gonna cause us problems. So, you know, my wife, I told her, and she actually didn't agree, she was wrong, but she was, you know, she's just a parent, she shouldn't have started up with the guy either, and she was stupid to have her barrier on the trail. He told her that she agreed. He could have just driven right in, and off there, that was it. You know, like my wife's barrier comes in, you know, that they were just so dumb, I don't know why he did it there. So other than that, like, everything's sort of, once we get in, we're there. Yeah, we're sort of reining her in a little, because she needs to know some of these rules. We told her not to come here, so she has no rights to come here, so.
Emily, I have a question with regard to precedent. So, for example, my neighborhood here, Cherry Ridge, abuts a bridle trail that backs up to Glenmore Country Club, and we have some residents who are members and love nothing more than to have a golf cart that they can then take on the trail and shortcut their way after 12 martinis home or what have you. Has something like that ever come up, or does that open up a Pandora's box for people that want vehicular access for whatever reason to trails?
Yes, that's come up numerous times there. People taking golf carts out of Buell Mansion. We've had requests, we've had people just cut locks and use it. So yes, it's a bad precedent, and it's not allowed by city regulations, and nothing has been allowed in that manner.
Okay, well, let's have some discussion probably about what our recommendation, keep that in mind, that this is just gonna be our recommendation to city council. Obviously, the city is recommending not to, extend or create a new agreement, I guess I should say, between the city, and the resident. I will tell you from just reading this, I see both arguments. I mean, the reality is if there was no bridle path, sure, there would have to be a different way that you would have to have access, because otherwise you'd have to drive across other people's properties, if there was no easement, and if there was. Well, I'm just saying, if there wasn't, like, that property was still what it is before the bridle path was created and how it was, and so there would have had to have been a different way. On the flip side, it's concerning to me that an agreement was made that allowed something that was not consistent with what happens, and it didn't come in front of the city council, and it didn't come in front of PTRC, so that we don't have a record, and we don't have, because I can understand if, something is verbally said to you, like, every year we'll just renew it, it's no big deal. Unfortunately, now we don't have any record of that, and that's not fair to you as a homeowner either. So I see your concern on this as well. So I don't know what everybody's thought is. I will tell you, my initial thought is to just leave unfettered access. We still, even as a city, have a right to, or an obligation to protect anybody on the trails. And so to just allow for access without notice and things like that, I have concerns. Because while it's not you driving back there, it's somebody bringing hay, and we don't know who they are, if they're paying attention. And our residents are on those trails, and so we still also have an obligation to them. So with all that, I don't know where everybody kind of lands, and what their thoughts are on this.
Well, first of all, I can appreciate this concern, from both sides as well, because specifically, because of the horses and you're building this barn thinking that you could access their food and their medical needs. I mean, I think that's a very legitimate and big concern. It sounds like it would be a big hassle, not only on the individuals that are pulling in the food and the supplies and the people that are coming out to help the horses, but it would just be a burden on the community if you end up with all these wagons and all of this kind of wasted time. On the flip side, I'm a very global thinker. I actually think about my neighbors and the city and who's involved, and whenever I make decisions, I think about who's affected. And my biggest concern is kind of echo what Stephanie said, is I really think it's a concern, especially with the uptick in use of the trails, that there's a vehicle out there, and that's a concern. My little kids are out there, other people's kids are out there. I'm sorry, this is very difficult. I apologize. So, I mean, I think it's fair enough to say that the city definitely needs, as, especially as they state, with all these people on the trail. I also think, I never like really a fight. It seems like it's not necessarily a fight, but I think if the city has a point or some kind of resource issue, maybe it's fair to say that you want to step in and say, how can I help the city to, manage this better and make it a little more easy, instead of, wanting to just kind of throw things on top of them because it's their job to protect the city, to protect their residents. So it would be nice to see if there's some more of a compromising point. Understanding you have a tenant in there and it sounds like, you know, if you can communicate with them and, you know, they're on board with that, and then that's fair. So from my perspective, I think, you know, with cooperation with the city and with, you know, some understanding of how they have to pull resources to do this, so maybe trying to be as efficient as possible when you're going out there, that, seems reasonable to me, and it is your land, it is your property, and you did build this barn, and, you know, maybe the agreement includes like, maybe it's 1 year, maybe it's longer, I know you don't want, you know, limitations too much, but maybe it's just to prove that you and the city can work all together.
Yeah, I think that my previous property owners had a similar problem, which is why they found a solution to actually pave the footbridge and make the barn accessible without having to come from another point. And I would really urge you to consider that, so this would not come up again. There has to be some engineering way to be able to access the barn over the Little Dry Creek at some point, and then you never have to worry about it again. And I don't know what kind of budgets you have for that. I know we're all in a difficult time, but I kind of like the idea of keeping the bridle trails vehicle free unless absolutely necessary for emergencies.
Well, I think I pretty much stated, I mean, I feel like he's got this property. Clearly there was some sort of miscommunication or a gap in proper documentation regarding the easement and access to his property. But it is, I'm familiar with this property and I don't see another way to access and feed the horses. I'd like to propose that there be some sort of agreement. I don't particularly like just unsolicited driving down the bridle trail by Mary Keith. I think that it needs to be maybe a set, maybe the first Friday of every month. You know, obviously you can't dictate if a horse is gonna have colic and need veterinarian emergency care and somebody has to access the, and the last thing you need to do is be calling City Hall to get easement rights to get down that bridle trail, but maybe to limit the number of times and keep it to a certain, you know, maybe the first Friday of the month. I'm just proposing that date, but in terms of the hay delivery, obviously if there's an emergency, it changes that, but I don't know who delivers your hay, if it's Mary Keith or if it's someone else, I don't know, but I think that there needs to be, you know, a clearer understanding and communication, and Mary needs to know her boundaries as to where, you know, her access and her availability to that property. If she's gonna continue to board her horses and take care of yours kind of thing, but I feel like it's your property and you need access to be able to feed your horses and it's your right to have that easement, so I vote in favor of the homeowner.
That was me.
If Mr. Skolnick was the only owner of horses on that property and you had no intention of boarding horses for somebody else, then the argument of access off of Layton Drive might hold some water, but the topo there is very steep, so I get that.
It's on that Alta, actually.
Yeah, and I've walked those areas, so I understand that. So since Mary Keith's the outsider and she's boarding horses there and you don't want her coming across your property from Layton, then access has got to be from the bridle trail. And if we can just come to an agreement of how many times a month or a year that you need access, and Mary needs access, then.
And we would not be boarding horses unless we had a horse there. Let that be clear for the record.
Yeah.
We're not interested in boarding horses to board horses. We just found that, you know, she was down the street before. I mean, it was somehow my wife found her and there was a way to, our horse was actually somewhere else. But because because we brought in Mary, we were able to bring our horse
Yeah.
from Parker and have it on the property, so you get the enjoyment of that, plus you save the board from Parker. So,
Right.
you know, if you want to think about the agreement of putting on some restrictions like Commissioner Scott suggested, which makes sense to have some communication, but also to have, like Commissioner Murphy said, you know, a paragraph for emergencies, you gotta have that. And of course, we wouldn't have horse boarding if it wasn't our own horse. We could probably sell that to my wife. And then we could all have an agreement that makes sense.
Yeah.
With all due respect to Mr. Commissioner Levinson, it's impossible. You're more than welcome to walk my property. But I'm not sure what you're talking about. Someone paved something before, but my property is impossible. With the grade, to get a vehicle bridge of some sort. So it sounds like with some of the votes, there's a workable agreement. If you want to go that route, I guess I just need to know the deadline and how this works.
Well, hold on, I'm gonna keep going because I'd like to hear from our final commissioner, and then I think we can kind of have a little bit of discussion. Then PTRC, just so you know, will make a recommendation of what we think should happen. The city will present our recommendation to council. Council will have discussions, and it will go from there. But ours is not a decision, it is a recommendation.
I'm not gonna rehash what we've all talked about. Mr. Skolnick, I completely sympathize as a homeowner. If we were outside the confines of this commission, it would be a layup. But our responsibility as commissioners is to see what we can do within the regulations of the city. And I take, there is no precedent, unfortunately, but I don't think we want to set a precedent that can therefore be exploited by others in the city. So I would not be in favor of this, but again, having sympathy and trying to find a workable solution, I think the only way I could be in favor of doing something is if it has strict restrictions so that there cannot be exploitable precedent there. And then it's something where it is revocable by the city, so that if you do not agree to the, outlines in the agreement, it will be revoked. So it would be something where it is periodic, has to be, with city's awareness.
I agree with you. You're right. I mean, having heard that this is the only one in the city, having heard the Pandora's box about the golf course and the golf carts, it makes sense to me to have an agreement versus, because that way you could go to people who are on these golf carts and say, you can't do it, has to have an agreement. So by having an agreement, you can go to all the other people, all the other accessors to the path, and you can actually say, no, you can only do that, or he's only doing it because he has an agreement. So I agree, the agreement makes sense because then it gives you the teeth to turn down other accessors, for, whether it's abuse or whatever.
I mean, I would tell you because I don't know, I mean, I understand that we had one agreement and it was not renewed in writing, and so there really hasn't been an agreement for 6 years arguably, but you've been using it and nobody stopped you and nobody said anything, you've been using it for 6 years, and, it sounds like there was an incident, which is what brought this up to everybody's attention. And so, just to say, never mind, you guys have said, can't do anything again. So I think it would be my opinion that the agreement, which was the 2013 agreement, with those restrictions, that would be my recommendation, with the idea that I can understand the city's concern because there are resources and time that when they are doing this and removing the bollard and waiting and making sure that paths are safe to move that out, it's costing the city money, which costs all of the taxpayers money for your personal property. And in addition, it's taking them away from other city duties that they have. And so I don't know if the city can prepare some sort of what it costs, compensation, things like that to put within the agreement so that for lack of a better term, the taxpayers of Cherry Hills are not funding this. And I understand it happens not as frequently, it's not an everyday thing or anything of that nature, but I do think we need to figure out some sort of equity piece for both sides. So my agreement with my recommendation, and I'll put those up there and then kind of make a recommendation to move forward to city council, but would be to continue with exhibit A, with the understanding that the city prepare some information regarding time and resources it takes to comply with exhibit A for the homeowner so that they can have access to things of that nature. That would be mine. Everybody else's thoughts are.
No, that sounds,
I think before you vote, you should consider the fact that we did have an agreement. So literally taking away the agreement, taking away the rights, so just keep that in mind. But we did have an agreement. You know, it wasn't irrevocable, but I think it's very easy to the city would even consider taking away the agreement that was already agreed to.
agreed.
Yeah, I would just say that, I agree with Stephanie, I think, and I agree with you, that I think the agreement should just remain in place, but that's what the stipulations, that the city is aware when you're accessing the trail, and that they do, yeah, the safety is an issue.
All right, so a little bit contrary to what you put forth, Emily, I don't know if you want us to take a vote on that or something. How do you want us to proceed?
Sure, I would suggest that you make the motion that you had just suggested, and that the committee can vote on that. And we're certainly, since part of that was preparing an estimate for city council of time and resources used in order to provide that access, we can have that ready to present to city council as well.
All right, so I would move that PTRC recommend to city council that there is a continuation with the agreement as was signed back in 2013 with not the changes that were presented in Exhibit C, with the continued restrictions, with the caveat that the city prepare what the cost is to the city to allow for access, so that an agreement can be reached so that there is no detriment to either party. I don't know how great of a motion that was, Emily, I'm really sorry.
That's okay.
Is there a second? All in favor? Opposed? We have a no, an abstention.
Sorry, clarify, I was a late night.
Oh, you were late, aye. Sorry, okay.
4 ayes.
No.
5 ayes.
5 ayes and 1 abstention, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
You want to go see? Because I can smell them. So, also my property is, so I understand.
Okay, yeah, it's a while.
So we will schedule, this is scheduled already for city council at their September 1st meeting. So we will expect to bring them your recommendation and the information that you suggested at that council meeting.
Could I put my email on the sign? I think it'll be easier for me to change this.
Does that make sense what we just recommended, sir?
Pardon me?
Did you understand what we recommended to go to city council?
No, not 100%.
Okay, we recommended that your original agreement be honored. So not your new agreement, but your original agreement be honored. But then in addition for them to look at the cost of the city, their time and their resources to open the gate per the agreement, and to try and work out some sort of financial agreement between you and the city to allow you to do that. So that's the recommendation that's going up to city council from PTRC.
Okay.
I really like Mr. Murphy's idea about kind of, the gates can be open on this day from this time to this time. And that way it shouldn't be too many resources to show up, unlock it and come back the next day to relock it. I think that'd be pretty low maintenance, I'm not sure.
Try to pick hours where there's less traffic, I would help too. I think that's a good idea as far as safety. When you go to council, when is the, based on the agenda?
Yeah, September 1st at the city council meeting, it sounds like, Emily, is that correct, that they will be discussing this, so you're gonna probably want to put that on your calendar to be there for this, so that you can speak on it.
Okay, but I'm, one more question. I'm an animal person, so my worry is the gates can be open, you know, first, say, first Friday of the month, you know, from whatever to whatever. But what if one of his horses has colic and needs emergency veterinary care, and needs to be, it needs like immediate access, and it had, you know, horses don't, you know, pick a time during, on a Friday to have colic, and it's in the middle of the night. I would hope that he would have access or some sort of key for emergency purposes only to open the gate or whatever it is. I don't know how that would, I don't know how you get around that, but I mean, I'm thinking in terms of an emergency and what would happen.
Sure. So in emergency situations, when there needs to be, like if an ambulance needed to access a trail, the police department does have keys to all of those locks. So call, you know, and they're there 24/7. So in an emergency, calling the police department will get you access to a trail.
So, I just want to be clear, so the suggestion is to renew as is?
Yes.
As was, well,
Yeah.
okay. As original.
Back to 2000.
Okay.
Perfect. Thank you for being here, Mr. Spelling. We
Thank you.
appreciate it. Thank you.
Appreciate all your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I have a question for Emily and Jay. Every single bollard that's on a trail in Cherry Hills at an access point that has a lock on it, there is no private landowner adjacent to that has a key to that lock. Every single lock has to be unlocked by somebody from the city.
Correct.
All right?
All right. We will continue with new business and then we'll circle back to the unfinished business draft 2021 budget and PTRC priorities list.
Sure. Give me just a second to get my paperwork together here.
Is that where you want me to go?
Sure. It doesn't, order does not matter. So that works. Let's finish up new business first.
There is obviously a memo that you have included in our packet.
Yes, so somehow it's budget season already again. So we're in the process of creating our preliminary 2021 budget for city council's review. It's helpful every year for us to have the PTRC's priorities for next year to make sure that they're actually accounted for in the budget. And that staff's perception of what our priorities are is in line with PTRC's. So I've attached for your reference the 2020 list that we have worked our way through and our suggestions for 2021. So I will just skip to 2021 and run through. And this year we have also included parks projects that are going on and might not necessarily involve PTRC, but just so that you're aware of them. So we have the standard improvements and programming in city parks and trails for $10,000. That has appeared every year for the past few years, and it's really sort of PTRC's discretion what those funds can be used for. So that appears in the budget year over year, and it's just general park improvements. We have slightly increased the budget for special events this year because we're anticipating doing a larger John Mead Park grand opening in 2021 rather than in 2020. So we have included additional funds for that. We also have the trail signing project continuing next year, an additional $10,000 for that item. The city master plan, which does not involve any funding from parks, but it's just something for PTRC to have on your radar, since parts of it will involve PTRC. We've also included $1,500 for a passable e-bike code change because we've been having these discussions. The $1,500 would really be for any legal fees associated with changes to the municipal code. And then our additional 2021 parks projects are finishing the trail connection to the Hampton Underpass, which knock on wood is moving along smoothly right now on Denver's part. Bellevue Underpass improvements for $40,000. That would be putting a concrete floor on the Bellevue Underpass because there have been issues in the past with that flooding, getting very muddy. So we had that in the budget for this year. We didn't get to it for this year, so the hope would be to roll it over into next year and collaborate with Greenwood Village on that item.
Concrete flooring with some sort of French drain system?
Yeah, so right now there are drains on either side of the underpass. So the idea would be to grade it so that it effectively drains to those located on either side. And lastly is the Highline Canal Irrigation Project. So that would be extending a pilot program of irrigation for those trees that's already in place. And this would be going immediately north of Bellevue. So providing extra water for the trees that are along the High Line as there's less water in the High Line every year. So I'm not looking for a motion on this item. I'm really looking for PTRC's feedback, input, suggestions on this list.
Yeah, I have a question about the High Line Canal. I guess I'm confused. Cherry Hills Village assumes the responsibility for its 3.5 miles of the High Line in what year? Next year?
We have not determined a specific year.
When South Suburban goes away and we become
Well,
the owners basically on the High Line.
when we left South Suburban, we took over the lease. We currently have that lease. It's 6 feet either side of the trail is what we maintain, the trail and 6 feet either side. There has been no determination as to, well, the city won't own it. It was, Denver Water has decided they're going to keep it. Based on the recreation portion of it, the stormwater portion of it, no year has been decided as to when municipalities, special district counties will take over maintenance of not only the trail, but the canal itself.
Yeah, Jay, that's what I'm really concerned about because the canal is just a mess. And I just don't know who is going to spend the time, because it's going to take a huge amount of regular maintenance to keep that canal clear of the debris and the pruning that's going to have to go on. It's just, every time I walk over to Dahlia Parking Lot Bridge, I just look down and think, oh my God, who's going to clean all this up?
And that hasn't been decided, but the city is not taking over the maintenance of the canal itself anytime, not next year, certainly.
And that's not part of Harriet's project at all, to clean up the canal. She's just concerned with the access path along it and making sure it's clear and so.
No, so they've been doing regular cleanups this year in the canal and along the trail. If you go to their website, they're scheduled like every other week. So that is part of the Conservancy's mission. And as they go through the transition to stormwater, that will also be part of it. But right now they and all 11 jurisdictions along the canal are in the process of determining that governance structure going forward. But there's no set year that we would take over all the maintenance or that basically those discussions are still ongoing and it's still sort of early days.
Yeah.
Okay, so it sounds like, I guess maybe from everybody, and you don't have to chime in if you don't want to, but with the projects that have been proposed, are those good priorities? Is there anything not on this list that we would also like to discuss?
Yeah, so I really don't know how this works, so I apologize. I'm just kind of gonna throw out a few ideas. If I'm out of line, please do tell me. I think I mentioned this before, but I'm also on the board of the park people that plant trees, and just a couple things came to mind. The trails are being used so much more. such an unforeseen timeline as to when this may or may not stop. And I know a lot of kids are really enjoying the trails a lot more, of course, the equestrian riders are enjoying it, I mean, everybody, really everybody. I didn't know if we could include in the special event section. And since also we really don't know what may or may not be able to go, like we're pushing out the Dumb Meat event, because we're, these things, the more outdoors is more prevalent right now. If there's anything that could be done that's unique to the situation that we're in. And I mentioned the park people because maybe also we want to, consider planting things or putting things out there for families to do together. I'm just throwing this out there. I don't know the protocol here. But it's just a suggestion because, maybe some of these events will be hard. Maybe a movie night, unless it's really spaced out, even if it's outdoors, may be difficult. I'm not sure. It's like commemorative to the fact that the usage of this outdoor space is just uptick so much. So just putting it out there.
So something that doesn't appear right here, but that we do every year is our tree planting program, which we were able to pull off this year in a no contact way. And hopefully we'll be able to do next year. But so something that we do every year is in April, we have a tree program where residents can purchase trees through the city and we'll deliver them to them to plant on their private properties. So that is another sort of green project that we do, or event that we do that unfortunately I don't have listed on the special event since we consider it a program.
I'm just curious where that's kind of marketed. I haven't ever seen it before. I was just curious.
On our city website, on social media, and in the village crier every year.
Any other priorities that anybody would like to see for 2021?
I'm gonna say it again, parks, trails, and recreation, so I'm not sure. We did want to make it a priority. I would like to make it a bigger priority. Recreation brings communities together. We don't have any program, so. I can't say any, we don't have many programs.
And if the commission wants to do specific recreation programs, I think that fits under the first priority of programming in city parks and trails. So if you're comfortable with that amount, that would be the question I'd have for the committee or for the commission, sorry. Okay.
And along the same line, I'd like to see, I'm thinking of CHASA and the sports that are allowed this fall are, boys golf, boys tennis, and cross country, which is a co-ed sport for all Colorado high schools. So if cross country is allowed, it would be really interesting and really, I love the idea of along the lines of what you're saying, to maybe implement some trail walking, family outings, maybe even some little fun runs along our little trails in the village to promote the village trails and also, get some fun use and along the lines of the recreation component of our parks, trails, and rec.
So I guess from what I'm hearing, that maybe there's a piece, and I think we can add it under there, Emily, but to focus more heavily on the recreation part of our meeting also. And so I'll let people more creative than myself look at that. Okay, so I think, is there anything else we want to focus on?
For 2020?
Yeah.
Yes, so I will incorporate recreation and programming more heavily into that first priority then based on all this feedback. And yes, hopefully we'll be able to do all of the events and all of the things in 2021.
Perfect. And then Emily, do you want us to assign to them? What's our next?
No, it's really just giving, we don't need to divvy them out amongst commissioners or anything like that. It's really just making sure that we have your priorities correct and we've allocated funds correctly when we go to city council. to propose our draft budget.
So we're good with that.
Yes,
The answer.
yes.
All right. Okay, let's go back to unfinished business. Highline Canal signs and midpoint marker.
Yes, so I apologize. You have an amended memo on the dais. I saved the file in the wrong folder. I take full responsibility for that, and I'm sorry. So the memo that appeared in your packet is actually the memo from the last meeting, and didn't contain the new information I have for you. So we do not have Josh Phillips calling in tonight. He gave me an update that I am going to relay to you, and that's in this amended memo. So he, based on your feedback, that to try to make the halfway mile marker for the canal more detailed and more, I think Vice Chair Wolf, you had suggested it, just give more information about what are you halfway between. So Art House, the Conservancy's designer, did try to fit that text about Waterton Canyon as this direction and, you know, Headgate 164 is this direction onto that mile marker, and determined it was just too crowded. The text would be too small to really be practical for trail users. So what their suggestion was to keep the simple design for the marker that they'd originally proposed, but add an interpretive sign or maybe 2 interpretive signs to this location to really as more of a placemaking exercise than just having the halfway mile marker. So their suggestion was to add this interpretive signage that could really give that detailed background information about this is what you're halfway between. Waterton Canyon is this way. You know, Headgate 164, which is the last headgate on the canal, is this direction, and give the context and history of those 2 things. So their suggestion was to incorporate that into the interpretive signing package that will be coming out after the rules signing, the rules and navigation signs, which should be installed this fall, to really make this more of an interpretive moment on the trail rather than just having the bollard there or having the halfway marker. So I was looking to get your feedback on that idea of adding interpretive signs along with the mile marker, rather than just trying to have the mile marker do multiple things.
Well, it seems to me if you've got this 3.5 foot granite stone that's 6 inches wide, or whatever, something like that, you could use a visual and just have a line that looks like the creek. Waterton Canyon down here and 64 up here, and you are here in the middle, and it kind of self-interpretive.
I think they just weren't able. I haven't talked to Art House directly. I apologize. I'm working with the Conservancy who's working with Art House, but they just weren't able to fit it in sort of an elegant enough way that fit, they thought, with the rest of the mile markers and the rest of the signage.
I get the point. I just worry about cluttering it up with another sign next to the mile marker.
Another option too would be if you like the idea of sort of making a bigger deal out of the halfway point, we could also move that interpretive signage into Three Pond Park, because this is, I mean, the halfway mile marker is at Three Pond Park. So what we could suggest instead is bringing that interpretive signage to another spot in the park. If you want to have that interpretation, but don't necessarily want it right on the trail. There will be the interpretive signing package isn't out yet, they're still designing it, but there will be interpretive signs along the canal. So this is sort of a stretch to think about right now, because we haven't talked about other interpretive signs on the canal, but it will be a whole set of signs. This won't be the only 2 that appear adjacent to the canal.
Well, I think the halfway marker has to be on the canal.
Yes. it
Doesn't
would.
do you any good to have it down in Three Pond Park.
No, I wouldn't suggest moving the mile marker. More just putting interpretive signage in. If we don't want the interpretive signage on the canal, putting interpretive signage in Three Pond Park that says Three Pond is at the halfway point, you know, Waterton Canyon, et cetera, et cetera.
I mean, it's hard to say because I would like to see it.
Yeah.
It's very hard to be like, yeah, let's do it, or no, let's not, because I don't even know what we're talking about putting on. Like, I'd like to see a visual of it. I mean, so I don't know if it's not too much work, if it's not too much, I would like to, if the timeline is fine as well, to table it and say, can you present us what this will look like? And you said there's other interpretive signs, like how are they setting those up?
We're not there yet, unfortunately.
Okay.
That's, so the rules and navigation signs are coming out first. That's what we've been working on for the past, I don't know, 8 months. So the interpretive signs will be after that. So I mean, we don't have a count yet. We don't have, mock-ups yet. Unfortunately, since they're very early in the process with Art House. I think it would be helpful from the Conservancy's perspective to have a decision about the halfway mile marker itself. And there isn't a need for the commission at this point to make a decision where the interpretive signs go or if there should be interpretive signs. The decision is really about the halfway mile marker. And then these were sort of other creative solutions since we couldn't get all the information on the mile marker that we had hoped for.
Well, Harriet's folks, I've been in her office, I've seen the people working on the signs. They can do a mock-up of the halfway sign and bring it in here and show it to us. They've done this before.
Of the stone bollard itself.
Yeah. It's not real stone, but it's a mock-up of what these signs look like.
Yes,
And
so this
doesn't have
one,
to be, I don't see any sense of urgency necessarily on this right now. There are a lot of things that have to be done here. So at some point, they can do that.
So Emily, is your question for us just, do we want to have a halfway mile marker?
I think the commission had determined previously that you do want a halfway mile marker. This question was really at the last meeting, you had asked the Conservancy if we could get more information on that mile marker about what is in both directions. And so Art House in trying to do that determined that they wouldn't be able to fit all of that on that bollard. So their question was, so you have a mock-up of the original one in your packets that just has, halfway mile 35.5, the Conservancy logo, and then the donor on the side, which in this case is the Conservancy Board of Directors. So they were looking to see if this one is then acceptable to PTRC and they can move forward with this mock-up or with this as the plan, and discuss the possibility of interpretive signage going forward.
Okay. I don't have a problem with that. Does anybody else have any issue? Okay. Do you need a vote?
I don't think so. I can just bring them the direction that you're comfortable with this
Yes.
as the halfway mile marker. And we'll continue the discussion about interpretive signage at this location when we get to the interpretive signage package. And then you'll all have more context too about what other signs are planned.
Yeah. When are the underpasses to be finished?
Oh, that's $1 million question.
The underpasses under Hamden and
Colorado.
Boulevard, the underpasses are actually done. So,
When are cyclists going to be?
so.
That's on us.
The last construction schedule I saw was November or December for the connection on the Denver side. Ours is due back, the bid is out right now. We should have bids the second week of September. We hope to be able to roll right into construction within a month after that. So we will hopefully be at about the same time towards the end of the year, beginning of next year, that the entire project will be hooked up and ready to go.
Okay, well then it does fit very nicely into the 2021 schedule for us, because when those two underpasses open, my opinion, we're gonna have a whole new set of problems here in Cherry Hills because of all the people coming into the village that haven't been able to get here before. And one of those problems is e-bikes. And I know I've harped on it, but I had 2 more situations this week that somebody's gonna get hurt. And then somebody's gonna find out, oh, your municipal code prohibits motorized vehicles. Oh, we didn't know that. Who can we sue? And I was almost hit by a motorcycle on the bridle trail. Not an e-bike, a motorcycle. Now that kid on the motorcycle with his helmet, and he couldn't hear me, I waved him down, all this, he doesn't know that he's not supposed to be there. Why? Because we don't have any signs.
Is there any municipality that would allow a motorcycle on a trail?
Not that I know.
Like, he may truly just be breaking the law, and I'm not saying
Yeah.
that it was right, but,
I don't know of any city that lets motorcycles on their trails.
Yeah,
I mean, I know, Emily, I CC'd you on an email that I got from someone about speeds of just bicyclists. It wasn't particularly focused on e-bikes, but I do think, and I know you put that as a priority, but I do think we can add that to one of our agendas and notice it so that, because I think there's a lot of public comment that would like to be heard on this, both for and against e-bikes and speed limits and things like that. I think also I would like to know, because right, we can put as many rules as we want in place, but if there's no enforcement, it doesn't do anything. And so what type of enforcement would be available? What is the cost of that enforcement? Because obviously if it puts an officer on the trails, it takes him away from the streets, or we have to have an additional officer. Like, there's a lot to think about. So I'm not turning on this where I want answers now, but I do think that maybe if we could start gathering that information so we can really have a detailed and educational discussion where also our city residents are here as well.
Absolutely. And that's part of the reason we've been stepping up the messaging on our social media and on, in the village crier, is trying to start that conversation and start getting that feedback from residents about what they're thinking and what they know in some cases and don't know. So we do plan to put that on a future agenda and are doing that background research also.
And I just want to mention again, to Commissioner Wolf's concern, and which I think is very legitimate, is back to the suggestion we had made 2 meetings ago, where we talked about, maybe having some kind of speed trap that they put out, that the city of Cherry Hill puts out on the roads for just letting people know their speed. And then I don't even know if cameras can be attached, and I think we brought that up, but maybe not an option just to have cameras for that enforcement piece. And maybe just to speak to the urgency, realizing this conversation and that this message will take a while to really sink in or really become, more broadly known.
So unfortunately, the speed trailers that we have right now are not designed to pick up cyclists' speed or size. So we could look into getting ones that are specific to that and price that out if that's what the commission is interested in. But the ones that we have right now are not effective for that. So we do have, especially since COVID started, because of the increased traffic on trails, the police department has been assigning an officer, particularly to the Highline Canal, when they have an officer available. So we have had officers on the canal as regularly as they possibly can. They mostly rely on education rather than enforcement. So they try to stop people and speak to them rather than just issuing tickets. But
well, there was a time, and Jay would remember this, I know. There was a time when there was a regular Cherry Hills policeman on a mountain bike on the Highline Canal in uniform. And I remember those years, and then all of a sudden it disappeared. And I talked to the chief about this, and she said, yes, because of the COVID, all the people on the Highline, I try to have 2 of my officers on foot together, just walking the Highline. Now, I haven't seen them in the last couple of weeks when I'm not there. But I'd love to know if the village has any plans to, make this on a more regular basis. And I agree, there are cyclists, saw this morning, that are they're training on the Highline, and they are going 20+ miles an hour. But I've also seen 2 more people on their mountain bikes, their feet up like you have on a motorcycle. And they're not pedaling at all. They're just going like crazy. And I'm thinking, that just doesn't feel right to me on trail. So, but until somebody says, you can't do that, they're gonna keep doing it. So,
Emily, when would be a good time we can put this on our agenda? Because I feel like it keeps coming up and we keep being like, we should talk about this, but we're not. So I feel like if we can set it for an agenda, everybody can come prepared.
I would suggest October or November, but I have not taken a look after September at what is coming up. But I would suggest skipping September and then doing October or November.
We look and see where it's best, and then that way we can make sure that we're prepared.
Maybe we can invite the police chief to
Yeah.
That would be great.
be part of the conversation.
I think that'd be great. Okay.
you know, another thing that too occurred to me with the village crier, I didn't know who, I still don't know who to talk to. But I wonder if it's possible for us to have a regular corner of a page that each issue highlights a particular section of our municipal code, so that people can begin to read and become familiar with the laws that are on the books that they don't know about.
So we have published the section of, well, a paraphrased section of the code about motorized vehicles not being permitted. Are there other sections that you would suggest we add? Because we can certainly run, I mean, we can run articles in the crier as long as we give Jessica notice.
Well,
So if there are other specific,
one of our clients
suggestions.
this week said to me, they just bought a lot in Cherry Hills and they need to take down some trees, big trees. And they said, you know, we heard from somebody that if we're not allowed to take trees down on our property. It's in the way of their new house. And I said, well, I'll check on that. And I did, and I think my understanding is if you take down 5 trees, then you have to replace 5 trees on your property when you're building a new home. I haven't gone to that part of the code, so I don't know exactly what that is, but they were concerned about it.
Is that a section that you would like run in the crier? Is that what you're saying?
As I say, I've got to look into that myself. They just had said this to me recently and they didn't know if that was the law or not. Were they going to be given a citation because they took down all these trees? Anyway.
I feel like maybe, Emily, another good article for the crier would be a speed limit on, like, do we have a speed limit on? Yeah.
Yes, it's 15. And we ran that too in the crier.
What?
We also ran that in the crier.
Yeah, I mean, I think that just, I mean, people need to see and hear things an average of 7 to 9 times before it sets in, so.
And yeah, I would like the second, your thoughts is that, I think parts of the code being put into the prior would be helpful. And even if they are diverse and maybe we want to make a list of ones that seem more regular, right? Like the trail rules, the rules on taking down trees, the rules on, just really anything throughout the city.
So I would suggest if the commission has specific sections of the code, the commission, and Kate has written articles for the crier in the past.
That's what I was just gonna bring up.
Yeah.
I'm happy to write whatever. I just want to make sure I'm politically correct in saying what I need to say or what you want me to put out there, but
Well, it's not an interpretation.
We do have an
It's
editor.
language.
Yeah.
Well, it is, I think, helpful for there to be some plain language in it rather than just sections of the municipal code because people wouldn't tend to read it. But I would suggest that commissioners submit those to us for publication if there are sections that are of particular interest that you think should be published.
I also would just remind, we're the Parks and Trails and Recreation Commission, so I do think that we need to, and I'm not saying that isn't an interesting thing that people probably should know, because I think people tear stuff down all the time, and, you know, I'd rather know it and not get in trouble for it, you know? So I think just as a general, from other commissions and things like that, it would be good to use that space for it. It doesn't always have to be from PTRC. But I think our articles can focus on PTRC.
But I do like the idea of putting in, maybe having a little section. And maybe just, we call it the, you know, PTRC interpretation, because it is sometimes the language of it or the verbiage is a little obscure, and maybe we interpret it in just layman's terms for public use and enjoyment of our beautiful PTRC, our Parks, Trails and Rec. And, you know, within that is, I would like to know those things too, because Xcel Energy comes and cuts down trees and, you know, and I'd love to, I know that's, I'm just saying, but I'd love to know whether, I think those are legitimate areas of interest, you know, for people within our village, and people live here because they love the trees. And
Then maybe what we can do is, if everybody's okay with it, so we don't take up too much of everybody's time tonight, is if there's things that have come up, like, for example, what you kind of come up with, but I think it's a really good topic, or anything else anybody has, to just email you, and we can see if it's something that we feel like we can write an article on that, you know, doesn't require like political or anything, it's truly, this is what the law says, this is just so you need to know.
but maybe my article, because I was going to be writing the article and then that all got canceled for Mead Park, you know, maybe the article would be trail safety and just a gentle reminder that, you know, no motorized vehicles, no e-bikes, no, I mean, a speed limit of no more than 15 miles an hour. Just a little gentle reminder that we all want to use these trails, and we're using these trails more than ever, but the given circumstances that we're all, you know, facing right now, and that we all want to enjoy it, and we don't want to see anybody get hurt, and just maybe that would be the intent of the article for this.
I think that would be really helpful. And it is helpful. Part of the reason I'm suggesting that you come up with topics and tell us is because I know what I think is important, but I think it's more important for the rest of the community and for residents to hear what you all as residents and as members of PTRC think is important, because that might be totally different from my interpretation as staff. So Kate, I think that would be a great start, just sort of a global Parks and Trails safety article would be a good way to kick that off.
Commissioner Wolf and just get some general, I mean, he knows the trails and better than anyone, and I just would love to see, I have seen little, not motorcycle, but little mini motorcycle, whatever you call it, little dirt bikes on the trails, and not only is it annoying with you know, then it causes all the dogs to bark, and it's scary if I'll get out when you're out walking and all of a sudden a little dirt bike goes flying by you. And so I think it would be an important article to put out there, just trail safety, kind of on those lines.
Sure.
Okay, sorry, we're on unfinished business. If we put a little, the Highland Canal, we're good. John Mead Park opening.
Okay, so switching gears. So the 75th anniversary committee at their last meeting on July 10th determined that they would suspend their event planning activities for 2020 because of all of the restrictions that are in place and how often they're changing. So the current guidelines for outdoor events are attached in your packet. That's also what the 75th committee was looking at when they made that decision, but really it turns the decision-making and planning for any John Mead Park event back over to PTRC. So a little bit of background on what's actually happening with the park. The park will be open when construction is complete. So the grand opening celebration was not ever going to be the park opening date. The two are very separate. So we want to make the park accessible basically as soon as we can, and as soon as it's safe to do so and finished. So that will sort of be a soft opening as soon as it's established enough. And sorry, I'm trying to do two things at once. Let me just scroll. I know, I'm just trying to get to where we are. So if anybody's watching on Zoom, they can see the agenda item. There we go. What'd you say?
Anyone watching just fell out of their chair.
Maybe, I've left them behind, I apologize. Anyway, so we'll open the park when the park is complete, is the long and short of that. So the grand opening is a little bit separate from that. So what staff is suggesting is that we do really a scaled back tour for PTRC and council before a council meeting rather than on a weekend day. Really just to make it so that we can have a ribbon cutting, we can have that small celebration with council that the project is complete. But really hold off on the larger celebration until 2021, when we can invite our partners, our funders, past council, past PTRC members, everybody that's been involved in designing the park, building the park, and planning everything, so that we can really have a good celebration and really just have this be a scaled back, just a scaled back ribbon cutting. So my suggestion would be to have it before the September 15th council meeting. That study session time is available at 5:30, and invite obviously council and PTRC to be there. Take a couple of photos. We can walk everybody around the park and show the different features. But for that really to be the extent of it. So I'm really looking for PTRC's feedback on that idea, and the idea of moving the larger celebration to sometime in 2021.
What's your best guess for when the park is going to be finished?
I keep being afraid to set a date on it.
I would
In
say
a
right
couple.
about this time, September, mid-September.
Yeah,
It might not be the 15th, it may be the 20th, but we are real close. Everyone's gonna walk in there and say, this is what we've got, but it takes a while for the wetlands to grow back and the native grasses to come in. But all the amenities are there. It's gonna be a big work in progress as all of that vegetation that's been planted comes back in. But yeah, you won't be able to walk on the native grass areas, but the small sod areas are ready. The boardwalks are ready, the paths are ready, the ponds are ready, so it's getting really close.
So by September 15th, all the construction, the fences, the trucks, the men, the barriers, all of that?
A majority of them will be gone. They've started taking down the fences, the construction trailer will go away tomorrow. So it's just those final, some more tree planting, some replanting of some native grasses. We had a few issues with the geese. We couldn't get any natives, so we now have a professional geese chasing dog that comes by a couple times a day.
We have it at Cherry Hills too.
Yeah.
yeah,
Terry, did you start it?
yes. So she comes over after Cherry Hills, so it's been working out very well now since that started. We really, yeah.
Does that work?
It does
Yes.
work, and so we've actually put it in the budget for next year, just to keep, so we can get some establishment. They were eating the shoots as fast as they were coming up, then they ate straw off the top of it. It's been a nightmare.
They really did a number on
So
the whole
explain the
Allen.
dog again.
So the dog comes and they're trained dogs, so they won't hurt the geese. They won't actually catch the geese, but they will run at the geese and scare them off of the property so that they take off. And she will come at a regular time, but our project manager over here, the geese came and landed in the afternoon, and he sent her a text and was like, they're here. And she was like, oh, we can't have that. And she came over in like 30 minutes.
What kind of dog?
I think it's a border collie.
Yeah, I think it's a color.
Yeah.
Huh.
So we need more border collies.
Yeah, it has really been effective. We're really happy with it.
We visited the elementary school because the geese are all over that field and they always track all the. It's not.
Oh, yeah.
Gross. So
Yeah.
anyway, but yeah, so she's looking, but,
Yeah.
okay. So do you think that September 15th is a viable date to do this, Emily, or do you
Yes.
want to push it to October?
I think that September 15th is fine. And we have a better chance that the weather cooperates with us on September 15th than that later October meeting, because there is a study session in the earlier October council meeting, so we'll have to skip that one. So I think September 15th will be fine.
Does that work for the majority of the commission?
Sure.
Yes, so it would be 5:30. Council meetings start at 6:30, and then they have a study session sometimes from 5:30 to 6:30. So we would start the tour and ribbon cutting at 5:30, and then council could come over an hour later to start their meeting.
Right.
Please summarize that in an email for us.
Oh, absolutely. So I'll send out an invitation and make sure that council, knows about that and it's on their agenda too. So, yes.
Perfect.
Okay.
Okay. Reports, chair, that is me. I think very briefly, we won't go too deep into the weeds on this one. I think everyone can add into it, but I think many of you got phone calls from Councilman Mike Gallagher regarding Quincy Parks. And you all were provided by Emily the letter from Natalie Anderson, Kat Anderson's granddaughter, about their intent to basically take back over the farm under a foundation of some sort, and really take that over. And I know that I had the opportunity to speak with Mayor Stewart. I had the opportunity to speak with Lucinda, who's the chair of the Quincy Farms Committee, as well as Mike Gallagher, councilman, who is kind of assigned as a liaison for this. And everybody, from what I have talked to everybody, they're excited. Think it's a good solution. There were a lot of issues that were coming up for the property that, maybe we knew, maybe we didn't know. That there's a lot of work, it's a lot of money. And so with what could be allowed to our constituents and everything else to really figure out that the city maintaining this and taking care of it may or may not be the best solution. I know that right now, this letter of intent that you all have been provided is where we are at right now. So city council has taken no position on this. While they're excited, the details have not been outlaid. And we all know that there's a lot of steps that have to be taken along the way before anything is going to come to us. So right now, I know that Ms. Anderson is working with her attorneys and tax people and all sorts of other people to see how this will work and make it work. So there is, no worries. There is nothing we need to do. We don't need to make a recommendation. We don't need to take a position, but obviously because Quincy Farms is underneath, it was just to advise everybody. So when I talked to Lucinda, motions are going to come out of Quincy Farm at their meeting next Tuesday to basically kind of push a pause on this until things can get figured out. So that's kind of the information I've been provided. Emily, I don't know what I missed that you want to add in.
No, I think you summed it up very well. We received this letter, and the Quincy Farm Committee has not met since we received this letter, since it was very recent. So they'll meet this coming Tuesday, the 18th at 8:30 in the morning. And they will discuss it for the first time at that meeting. So we're really waiting to hear from them on what the next steps are going to be.
I did meet with Jeff Roberts, and he tells me that the trail signing effort will be picked up again here in September. He said there's just kind of been a pause throughout the village on lots of different things because of COVID. So I have 4 of the 8 trails completed. And I would just love to see Jay and Jeff just come up with just a couple of no e-bike type signs and put them up somewhere where we can begin to get some feedback from people, see if they notice them and see if it's doing any good. You can put them on the same posts that our trail signs are on now. They're just that wide. It's just a bicycle with a slash through it and these bikes underneath it. It's just pretty straightforward to me. But we're gonna have a problem in this village with it if we don't, open our eyes. So, that's all I have.
Along what Fred just said, I guess my article would, if I write the next article, that would be along those lines of just trail safety and put it out there, so that we just don't want to have anything happen and have it come back to haunt us, so.
My report is short. I enrolled in a legal program through Purdue University because sometimes we talk about stuff and not qualified to have an opinion, and I'm just putting another certificate in my gut. Second off, I'm gonna work with the Arts Commission because we have a pretty basic logo, but I want like a seal or a crest or something really fancy for Cherry Hills Village that I don't believe is in existence right now. And I talked to former Mayor Chrisman about it. She likes the idea and she's gonna help me. But that's not us. Last thing, we have 2 llamas on the corner of Quincy and Colorado, but just for 3 days. If you want to go check out the llamas, let me know. They seem to be rather indifferent towards humans, but they're really pretty. That's it.
Thank you.
Nothing.
Emily, staff updates, if we haven't.
Just to say that I did include in your packet some more feedback that we got on speed limits and e-bikes for you to take a look at when you get a chance. And then also that, Fred, thank you for bringing up the trail registers at the last meeting. So the old trail boxes from the Trail Passport program. So we have removed those at this point. The Cherry Hills Land Preserve is not going to do any sort of activity with them. So we did take them down. And that's it. I have no more reports.
And Emily, did you get, I know it's not in here, but from Barbara,
I did, so I can share that with the whole commission tomorrow. It was another, for everyone else's context, it was another email about speed limits and bikes.
So, and if, just so the commission knows, if there are people, once we figure out the date that we're gonna address this, I would encourage us all to encourage our residents to attend, so that we can hear their feedback and experiences on the trails as well with the bikes and speed limits and motorcycles too. Man, so, all right, nothing else? Well, again, Jay, Pamela, Emily, thank you all for all that you do. We appreciate everything. And it's now 7:45.